What is up, most distinguished patrons of this channel? Today we are going to do the 6-month review on these three welding hoods, which if you've been around for a while, you remember I did a review on these things brand new. Well, it's time to see how well these things have held up, what I like, what I don't like, and if I had any failures, which I definitely did have. At least one issue with one of these. So I guess you'll have to watch the video to find out which one that is. So let's get into it. So I bought all of these, did an initial review, and have been using them on and off for random jobs as well as taking them to work where I work as a welder fabricator. And I've been using the piss out of these things, along with even letting other people use them, get their opinions on it, to where I could kind of form a grand opinion on these and which one I think is really the best out of them. Because let's face it, opening these up out of the box, you're happy to get it, you spent a bunch of money, and well, that might tide you over for a couple weeks. But if the junk doesn't work 6 months in, we should have a pretty good opinion on that. Well, at least I will, because I've used these for 6 months and I definitely have formed some significant opinions on these. And I'll be upfront and honest and say, what I found isn't that much different than what my initial review was, and all of the things I had issues with in that video, I also kind of found in the long-term use became a problem. And I'll talk about each hood individually as far as that's concerned. Now, I'm going to put a little disclaimer out here on this. One, I didn't get sent any of these. Two, I don't work for any of these companies, so I don't really care what I say or what I don't say about these, because I'm going to be honest about it, because I spent the channel's own money to buy these, and I definitely have an opinion on which one I would buy if I was faced with these three. So with that said, why don't we start out and talk about this Lincoln Viking 3350 ADV and what I like about it and what I don't. If you hear some rain in the background, I apologize for it. It's piss pouring rain outside. So this is the Lincoln Viking 3350. It is the ADV for Advanced Series. So this one uses a little bit different cartridge than the standard 3350. It has the external grind mode button just like the standard one. However, it also has a flashlight if you press and hold the button. The flashlight isn't super bright, which I kind of covered that in the initial review. I will say this though, in a pinch, in a dark area, it helps. And guess what? Anytime you're wearing this, you have a flashlight, which is a good thing, I would say. So it's not a detriment per se, but is it really the best thing? Well, you can put a flashlight, a headlamp on most of the other hoods without an issue aftermarket wise. So I don't really see that as a huge selling point, but it does work okay. It's not hugely beneficial because it's not bright enough. Now, the cartridge that's in here uses digital controls, and I can't say that I'm a huge fan of it. Now, in the first review video, I talked about how you can link this via Bluetooth to your cell phone, and that's going to be the first detriment of this helmet. Now, don't get me wrong, you can adjust everything directly on the hood, but that whole software program, the pairing, everything about that doesn't work as good as it should. I had a lot of false pairings with this and just issues, and I don't even use that. And if you were buying it to try and be super cool and use your phone adjusted, honestly, it's a gimmick. I'm going to be honest. It's a gimmick. So I don't see that as any kind of benefit. Now, the way that this adjusts shades is pretty decent. I like it's fairly easy to see. Luckily, this thing has survived 6 months of pretty hard use without it failing. That's a good sign. However, to be honest, I much prefer the standard 3350's dials, to be honest with you guys. This, it works, but is kind of unnecessary. Now, there's a couple other things that I find interesting. And I'm going to go through this menu here and put a picture of it up. So I'm not sure how it happened, but I was using this during a weld test, believe it or not, about the worst time you want equipment problems. But somehow I had selected auto shade And it has a fifth sensor on this, and it's only on the advanced series, that auto adjusts the dark shade. So if you set it for say 11 or 12, it will go up or down 2 shades based on how much ambient light this picks up. Well, in the middle of a vertical up weld test with 7018 I was doing, the thing would like randomly flicker, and I didn't understand what was going on, and somehow I had noticed it was flipped to that mode, and what it was doing is it determined that the light output was low enough that it could basically darken the shade less. So I thought it was flickering or something, the batteries were dying, something wasn't right. Well, and screwing around with it, I found out that's what happened. Luckily, I was able to finish the test, and I passed the bend test off of it, which is a huge plus. But that kind of thing happening that you don't expect is not good. And I think the auto shade feature of this is more of a gimmick than anything, because if you can't see what you're welding with a shade 10 or 11 or a 12, odds are 1 or 2 shades less isn't going to make the difference for you. You probably need glasses or a cheater lens. So again, I think that's kind of a gimmick, and you got to be careful that you don't accidentally put it on that, because it might work unpredictably. Now, on the plus side for this helmet, it works just like the 3350, so the arc sensors, as long as you keep this clean, by the way, work really good. And I have not really been flashed much at all, unless I'm like welding in a very small tight channel and it's just hits just right. I'll tell you what, this thing picks up an arc really good, especially with TIG. And that's something I really didn't mention in the first review, but all of these hoods do an excellent job of picking up low amp TIG welding. And when you get into cheap hoods, it becomes extremely difficult for them to work reliably. And this, as well as the Miller and the Esab in this video, all do a phenomenally good job with that, as well as obviously MIG and stick. But anyways, back to this particular hood. The arc sensors work great. The sensitivity is great. It responds when you adjust it up or down the way I like it. And once I got this thing set, it basically just works. And a great sign of a properly designed welding hood is that you just set it and you forget about it. You don't sit there constantly going up and down in settings, screwing with it in order to get it to work properly. And that's one thing I really like about this and the standard Lincoln hood, which, if you don't know, that's what I have used for 5, 6, 7 years now as a standard 3350, and it just works reliably, and I like that. So that is really good. Now the headgear on this, I'm not a huge fan of it, and I said that in the first video. I think that this headgear is not as, maybe not durable, because this didn't break, but I like the standard headgear better, and they switched to this and they're sticking with it. I am happy to report the clicker, so the adjuster works fine. Everything is fine with this, so reliable, no issues. And based on my usage of this, I have no reason to believe that this would not last for you in your home for a significant amount of time. Lincoln, for their welding hoods, have always been pretty good on reliability. Now, as far as the durability of the shell, well, this thing's got scrapes, burns, some of the plastic is melted a little bit, but it's held up just fine. This is the second or third, it's at least the second panel on here, the plastic that I've replaced, and they hold up about as well as all of the other ones out there. Not a big deal. And about the time it gets to where you can't see through it, you probably should clean it, and it's not going to be too much longer. You'll have to swap it to get the best vision. But overall, very solid package. I don't really have any complaints, other than my opinion is don't buy the ADV series. Even though it doesn't cost that much more money, I don't see the benefit really, other than the flashlight is handy. The rest of the crap isn't really a huge benefit, especially the software you can use to control this. Now let's look at the Miller. This is the Miller Digital Infinity. This was purchased along with the other ones about 6-7 months ago, and someone in the comments was telling me that the newer one has a grind mode button, and I don't believe that's the case. I'll put up now if that's accurate, but this one does not have a grind mode button. I will tell you what, this thing has been put through the ringer, probably more so than the Lincoln, because this one traveled with me on a couple adventures, simply because I could grab it easier than the other ones. The other ones were hanging up on the wall, and this happened to be out, so this has gone wheeling with me. And as you can see, there's some burn marks in the plastic down here. There's mud on it, and you know what? This thing is held up great. I've put probably at least 3 lenses on this because they get beat up over time. And overall, I got to say, this thing has worked phenomenally good. I have no complaints in that department. The arc sensors pick up an arc pretty good. Have had no real issues being flashed. And I am a big fan of the cartridge that's in here because of how simple it is to adjust. All of your adjustments are done via up or down on dark, short or longer for how long it stays dark, and then sensitivity more or less. And I really like the simplicity of that over especially that Lincoln hood where you got to go through multiple menus and screw with this. There are no menus really. You just adjust everything there. So I really like that. Now, the interesting thing about this cartridge and its sensitivity is that I found, so this has what's called X mode and then normal weld mode, and I screwed around with both of those modes a ton. And I found that it's actually kind of hard to dial in the sensitivity on this. Now, I'm used to how the Lincoln Viking works, so maybe that's part of it. But what I found is in X mode, which is supposed to pick up the electromagnetism of the arc or some, I don't want to call it nonsense, but something like that. I found that in X mode, if I had my phone in my pocket, like I almost always do, if I bent my head down, like my chin down, it would like pick up interference with my phone, and in X mode, it would flicker the screen. So that was kind of annoying, and then I would switch to normal weld mode, and I found that getting this thing dialed in was not a set it and forget it like the Lincoln. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Lincoln would have false positives from the IR sensor on the back of my phone, so that would get false positives where it would darken, but this I found to be a lot harder to predict when it would happen, and that was a little bit annoying. The actual cartridge, if you were welding, worked perfect. It's just in the lightened state, it kind of was intermittent interference, and it took more screwing around to kind of try and dial it out, and I don't feel that I ever had full control over that. So in that sense, the Lincoln, I think, is better than this. Now, welding outdoors, this is far less likely to have false positives if your phone is nowhere near where you're welding, or any other interference for that. Now, I didn't mention it with the Lincoln, but this also has it, and that is that this screen here is more or less protected, and you can just set this down and not worry about scratching the screen. That's something that, like the Esab that we'll be looking at shortly, does not have, and I really like the lens protection of this. All of the scratches are more or less just from grinders throwing stuff on here and not from resting it on the table. So that is very good. The decals on this, I gotta say, however they put this on here, very reliable. It's not coming off anywhere, and that's a great sign that this is going to be pretty durable for the long run. Now, the headgear, I'm happy to report, works 100%. And if anything, this little mechanism back here got a little bit stiffer with age. I mean, this takes quite a bit of force to turn now, far more than the other two. But I can't say that that's a bad thing, because guess what? You turn this, get it where you want, and it stays locked in. So I would definitely say this is a better headgear than the current Lincoln. And the funny thing is, in the first review video, I had mentioned that Miller went to a different style than this, and then they reverted back to this because their customers were so angry about the newer one. Well, Lincoln kind of did the same thing, but guess what? Lincoln isn't going back to the older one. So Miller has two options with this. Like I said in the first video, this is my preferred one. I don't think that that newer style that you can still buy separately is better than this. But I gotta say, this headgear is an absolute beast. I have no reason to doubt that this is gonna last probably 5, 6, 7 years of continuous use, so that is a huge plus. The foam on the front still is chintzy, as I said in a previous video, and you can see this is already looking pretty nasty, pretty wore. I wish they would put a better sweatband on it, but hey, everything else is honestly pretty good, very reliable, no real issues. Also, the detent, I had mentioned how strong it is on this hood, and it still is. If I can get it to pop here, I don't know if you heard that, but this sucker, when it's locked in the upright position, very sturdy. It's not going to fall down on you, and that was something that the other headgear, I guess, had issues with. So if you like your hood to stay up and you have issues with it popping down, this has by far the most beefy detent out of any of them. So this would probably be your go-to if that's a concern. But realistically, I don't have too much bad to say about this other than, like I said, it's finicky on adjusting to get it to work, and interference affects this more than I would have expected from electronics. From actual welding in the sun, this is actually, I would say, the best out of them overall. Well, let's look at the Esab. So the Esab Sentinel. This one probably appears to be in the best shape out of all of them, and to a certain extent I've used it less than the other ones, but the primary reason the shell appears less worn is that I do not set this down on its face, because guess what? You will scratch the hell out of this screen if you set it down on something. And that is kind of a huge detriment of this design. I mentioned it in the first video, that I wish that it had some kind of protection for the screen, because you're going to need to set this down like this. So I even got in arguments with people over that, because a few people said, well, you shouldn't be setting your hood down on its face anyways. And I think that idea is very short-sighted, because I'll give you a prime example. I was welding in the back of a garbage truck a couple months ago full of maggots. Do you really think that I want to set that thing down, the hood, like this, and have those little buggers crawl up in here and then go put it on my face? No. Setting it down on the face of it with any of the other welding hoods is a way to go, because odds are they're not going to crawl up this lip and in there fast enough to where I wouldn't see them. So I see that as kind of an impractical argument. The design of this for real world work, aka not bench work in a sanitary TIG facility, real world work with this, you are going to go through screens on this pretty quickly. Now, as far as everything else with this hood, I gotta say, it is a phenomenally good hood. There's a lot to like with it. First off, this thing seems to be the lightest. By the stats, it wouldn't suggest that this is as light as it feels, but I'm telling you, wearing this sucker all day, I don't have any pain in my neck. The balance of this is unreal good, especially when it flips up. It basically sits directly balanced over the middle of your head, unlike the other ones which stress your neck, especially that Lincoln. So the balance of this, unbelievably good. If you have neck pain with your hood, switching to this will probably help out with that significantly. I like the way that everything adjusts for the headgear on this. The headgear is good. However, it did suffer a problem. I'll talk about that in a minute. The cartridge in here is kind of a hybrid of the Lincoln and the Miller, in the sense that it does have a digital display. However, it's easier to adjust by far, I feel, than the Lincoln. It's easier to read. The bright yellow lettering on it's easier to read. The way it works, overall, I would say is definitely top tier. The sensitivity of this with the arc sensors, for whatever reason, just flat out works really good. And I would make a strong argument that in practical use with this, this is actually more sensitive than both the Lincoln and the Miller. I never had any kind of false flash where it went out of the dark mode and I got flashed, which is saying a lot, because I do a lot of like lower amp TIG work and like small little pieces, where the other ones would be more prone to that. Not that it really happened that often, but more prone. Part of that's probably because the arc sensors are spaced differently than the other two. You have two that are close and two that are a little bit further apart by the look of it. Well, actually, they're about the same. But for whatever reason, the arc sensors just flat out work good on this. Now, the way that you adjust some of the settings in here, I don't know if I'm a huge fan of it. It's a little bit harder than the Miller, a little bit more time consuming, but I still think it's better than the Lincoln. Speaking of the electronics, all of these have successfully made it 6 months on the original batteries. Now, that is not saying a whole lot because I didn't weld with any of these full time for 6 months. In my experience, the Lincoln style, with the switches, so the non-ADV version lasts about 3 months or less before you have to swap the battery. This guy uses 2 batteries. My guess is all of these are 3+ months, if not 6 months or more with solid use. So all of them are pretty decent. Now, speaking of the cartridge and that protection, the screen, I do not like how you have to swap these face shields out. There's a little screw over here, and what I find is when I need to swap the screen out, I loosen that up, and next thing you know, the screw falls on the ground, and now I'm trying to search for a screw. I wish they could have done that as toolless, and I don't know what they were thinking when they put that screw in there, because guess what? If you were to lose that and it dickers off somewhere in the shop, good luck finding it, and now you got to go find a screw to put in there that's probably going to end up breaking that piece, and now you can't retain these face shields unless you tape them on. So that is kind of, again, a detriment. Now, speaking of other detriments of this hood, I regret to inform you guys that this self-adjuster on here no longer works properly. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm going to tighten it. I don't remember if this sucker clicked a lot, but long story short, the adjuster still works, which is really good. That's a plus. But guess what? You can pull it and it will not tighten and hold its set point anymore. Considering this guy probably had the least amount of use out of all of them, that's not a very good sign. And being the resourceful individual I am, I took this cover plate off and looked at the mechanism. And let's take a look at that now and talk about it. So here's the internal of the mechanism. And I think what's going on is those little fingers that push out into the teeth. The plastic there is probably somehow fatigued, or it's not like springing outwards as much as it should. And that's why when you pull it, it just more or less spins, and it's supposed to catch the teeth on those little fingers per se, and it just doesn't reliably. Now, if I took a little heat gun or a soldering iron and heated up the plastic a little bit and then kind of rebent it, it would probably work again. And I might do that, but Esab is sending me a new headgear anyways. So if you have an issue where the headgear won't lock into place and it's just loose, this is likely the culprit, and you might be able to fix it. But I don't know, not really the best design, and honestly it's probably not that much different than other companies, but for whatever reason nothing seems broke, but it's not working the way it should. So that mechanism doesn't appear to be broke or anything, but it just doesn't work anymore, which is kind of a bummer. And I don't really remember in the first video what my opinion was initially on the mechanism. I remember it working pretty good, but I have doubts as to how well that's going to hold up. And as a matter of fact, in that first video, a couple people had mentioned that they had issues with this mechanism. So I feel pretty confident in saying that this mechanism may be a weak point of this hood, and if you use it a lot, I would expect similar things to happen to yours that happened to this. Now the good news is I reached out to Esab, told them about the problem, and they're sending me headgear replacement for this as we speak, so I have no doubt that it'll be up and running, but for how long, it's hard to say. And that's kind of a bummer, but hey, crap happens, and you know what, realistically, Who knows, maybe the newer one will work forever and it'll be better. What I will do is open it up and look if the design has changed or if somehow something is missing in this, then that's why. But my guess is it's going to be the same design. The plastic will be just less fatigued and bent, therefore it'll work better. Now, on other detriments, this grind mode button, I find it so strange that they put it on the right side of the helmet because most of us welders are right-handed, and when I'm holding a MIG gun or a TIG torch and I want to swap over and I'm holding a grinder, where do I hold my grinder? In my right hand, right? Well, now how I got to reach over the face to press this or use the back of my hand to press it. I don't understand why they put the grind mode button on the right side and not the left. To me, that's an odd oversight. I mean, for you left-handed welders, great. You have a great option here because this is the only one out there of the higher end ones that I know of that puts that on that side. Some of the cheaper helmets do that. Again, I'm not really sure why, because most of us are right-handed. It would make sense to put it here like everyone else generally does. But hey, whatever, they did it differently. Now the button is nice and big. It's a little bit hard to press, and that's something else I found using this, and I don't believe I mentioned that in the initial video. This actually takes quite a bit of force. Like, I'll hold this here. You almost compress the hood, and on your head, remember, this isn't like rigidly mounted. It's got the suspension, so when you press it, you can see what happens. Like, now it clicks. I find that to be awkward, and they should have used something with less pressure required. I mean, this belongs in a drill or something, so that's kind of a disappointment. Now, as far as other positives about this, my opinion, and this is my opinion, this has the best vision out of all three for both what the arc looks like, especially with TIG. It has the best overall sensitivity. I feel it just works just like the Lincoln, and it doesn't have too many false triggers. Like, I would say the Miller has the most amount of false triggers. This seems to be better than both of them, the Lincoln and the Miller. I cannot overstate how well balanced this is. I can't overstate it. Like, when you wear this, it's just flat out comfortable, and it's like you're not wearing anything in comparison. Like that Lincoln hood, I can't tell you how heavy that feels in comparison to this, and you wouldn't think it would make a difference, but try leaning over something all day welding. This is a game changer when it comes to the lightness of it. Like, I wish the other companies out there could follow the suit of this. But overall, I would say that this is still worth your money, even though the headgear has kind of an issue. Esab will take care of you like they took care of me, but that kind of sucks. But the overall package, I definitely think that this is up there. And my opinion is this is probably the best in-shop TIG hood out there. And that's of what I've used. The only hood I have not used that I can't really speak for in comparing this to it would be the Optrel, their high-end one. And Honeywell has a new one out that is stupidly expensive that they claim is the best ever. Well, I'm not paying $800 for a hood to find out. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe I will if you guys want me to see me test that. But for shop use TIG for bench work, this is what I would want to use. Well, with that said, let's go to conclusion on all of these. So in conclusion, I've used these all for 6 months, and I've also had numerous other people use these over the past 6 months, and I've shared my opinion with them. They've shared their opinion with me, and universally, everyone seems to be on the same page. And we'll start out with the Esab. Universally, everyone likes how light it is. They like how well it works. The vision is phenomenal. I personally like the widescreen where it's wider than it is tall, far better than the Lincoln, which the Lincoln style is what I've used forever. But both the Esab and the Miller are better than the Lincoln for the viewing angle. The widescreen is better. So the Esab is well liked, especially for comfort. My opinion is that unless you're doing bench work TIG, I don't think in the real world, aka you industrial welders, fabricators, general shop work where you're in and out of all sorts of stuff, confined spaces, I don't believe that that is the best hood out of these for that type of work. And that comes down to the fact the grind mode button simply does not work as well as the Lincolns. The way that you can't set it down on the face without scratching the hell out of the screen, and how it's not difficult to replace the screens, it's annoying. And that's why I think for clean bench TIG work, best out of them. So if that's what you're doing, 100% that's better, especially because of the color clarity is way better than the Millers. By far, night and day better. And you saw that in the clips in the first video. When it comes to the Lincoln hood, I believe that this is a exceptionally good general fabrication welding hood. So if you're welding in the back of garbage trucks like I do, I would have no hesitation recommending this, especially over the Esab. If you do TIG work and the color clarity and what you're seeing really matters, this is by far, my opinion, better of a TIG hood than the Miller, and because of what colors you can see, especially with stainless steel and just general fabrication work. Now, with that said, I do believe that how this isn't that recessed back in here. Don't get me wrong, if you set it down, it doesn't scratch the screen. However, when you look at how far this Miller is, at the lowest, it's like 3/8 of an inch offset. What I found is the screen gets scratched far easier than the Miller. The Miller's also easier to replace the screen because it comes out the front. That you have to pull the whole cartridge out. In my experience, the battery life on the Lincoln series is not really that good. You're going to replace the batteries at least 2 to 3 times as often as the other ones. So that is kind of a minor annoyance. Now, the 3350 ADV hood that's here, would I recommend it? If you can buy this for the same price as a standard one, buy it. If it costs more money, I honestly can't say that it's worth spending the more money. I don't like the digital interface. The Bluetooth is more or less a joke. It doesn't work and pair properly. And I've tried it with multiple phones and it just doesn't work the way that any reasonable app would. And the light isn't bright enough to really be a night or day difference maker. But the comfort, very good. Very big downside though is even though the headgear is comfortable, the weight of this sucker is a detriment. And I can tell when I wore this the day after that, my neck hurts at the end of the day because of how heavy this is. So again, buy the 3350 standard. I would not recommend this because you have the added weight of the extra battery, and it's just the heaviest out of all of them for neck feel. Now, I know that these suckers are reliable, and for general purpose, you really can't go wrong with this. As far as the Miller's concerned, I really like this hood. This has traveled with me quite a bit. I've done a lot of off-road welding repairs with it, and it has been very reliable. I wish that the cartridge in it wasn't as finicky. It just seems to be difficult to set, and when I think I got it where I want it, it's odd in that sense, which is kind of a, I don't want to say a letdown because it does work really good, but among these, I would say it doesn't work as good as those. But it still works pretty good, so it's not a huge deal, guys. Now, battery life, it hasn't died yet. I don't think it will. I mean, this thing's gonna get at least 6 months because it has 2 batteries compared to the typical of 1 in the Lincoln series. Now, the headgear, I would say the best out of all of them because, well, it still works and it's sturdy, far sturdier than this, and well, that one doesn't work anymore, so you have that. I like the cartridge, it's easy to adjust. The main detriments to this, honestly, and I didn't mention it earlier, the color you get out of it is more or less shades of blue. And when you weld with this sucker on low amp TIG and then you weld with this, what you can see, the difference, I 100% of the time will pick the Esab over this or the Lincoln. For general purpose fabrication, I really think this might actually be the best hood, and the reason's simple. In the lightened state, that sucker is so clear it's far clearer than those other two, and it makes it far easier to do things like grinding and cutting and screwing around with stuff while having your hood down. And I like that. That saves time. So the fact that its light shade is so light and bright is a huge positive to this. But realistically, for low amp TIG work and TIG work in general, you're going to want these two. For general fabrication work in a plant, you're going to want these two, especially with stick or MIG, all day long. If you're crawling in confined spaces and whatnot, again, these two are going to be the way to go. So with all of that said, if I had $200-300, which one would I buy? I gotta honestly say that it's hard because I really like that Esab, and I'm not too worried about the headgear issue because, well, warranty, that's what it's for, and $30 or so for the lack of neck pain every couple years or something with the headgear. I almost would say it's worth it. The biggest detriment I have, I guess, with that is, like I said, it's just you're gonna wreck the screens on it, and the grind mode button sucks. So I guess based on what I said, if I was going to spend $300 and tried to get a dual helmet, I would buy the Lincoln, the standard 3350, which is the hood that I've used for years, for 7 years. And maybe you can say it's bias, and I'm not, above that. Hey, maybe it is. It's just what I'm used to. But it just works so reliably, and it just makes sense. And I don't know what to say. Like, the positives that it have are so good that the overall score is really good, and it doesn't have too many big negatives other than the weight. The weight and the headgear isn't as good as it used to be, but it's still good. But realistically, I think for most of you guys out there, these two hoods are going to be what you should be looking at. And if you want a second hood for just TIG work, buy that. 100%. It's going to take care of you better than these two, but you're going to just wreck screens, like I said. So that's kind of what my opinion is. Everyone that's had a chance to use all three of these in the tin shed here kind of had the same opinion. Most of the people thought that the Esab was the best as far as just using it, and most of them even said that it was pretty amazing how good it actually was with the vision. And the least favorite, honestly, tended to be the Miller, and that was more or less because of the color that it produces isn't as good. But with that said, I mean, the actual vision of it, you can still see fine details. It's just that it's shades of like blue. You don't see color in it. But it's a very close call on this, and I hate to leave it on this because, hey, I wish that one of them was absolutely blew the others out of the water, but that's just not the case. If Lincoln ever went to a widescreen and made it lighter, they would have it 100%. They would #1 hood out there, my opinion. So with that said, thanks for sticking around for this update. If you got any opinions, feel free to share them in the comments. Until next time.